My name is Alexander. My job? Selling medical imaging equipment that costs more than a villa on the French Riviera. The kind of sophisticated machines that promise optimized diagnostics and an aggressive ROI for hospital groups. In reality, I sell very large metal boxes with buttons, but the packaging is called operational excellence. I spent 8 years at SynergyMed, a company that claimed to be a big family, while having higher turnover rates than the CAC 40 on a day of stock market panic. My problem wasn't the product, nor even the customers, who were often rational and intelligent people. No, my problem had a name and a title. Marc, my area manager. Marc was the archetype of the post-millennial leader. Incompetent, but with enough self-confidence to power Manhattan for a month. He had no idea about the technical complexity of our scanners or the realities on the ground. His only skill was micromanagement through terror and public humiliation. He spent his days in pointless quick syncs where he only talked about low-hanging fruit and deploying our strategy without ever defining it. The worst part was that he only had one way of feeling intelligent, putting me down in front of the customers. I remember a meeting with the APHP Paris Public Hospitals last year. I was explaining the new magnetic resonance imaging technology, a subject I knew inside and out, unlike him. Marc, sitting next to me, felt compelled to interrupt, cutting me off mid-sentence. Alex, I think it would be more proactive to let Mr. Dubois explain. After all, he's the specialist, isn't he? He said, a smug, condescending smile plastered on his face, implying that my contribution was nothing more than amateurish posturing. Dubois, who was sitting across from me, was my technical manager, not some specialist in corporate jargon. The message was clear. You're incompetent, Alex, and I'm putting you in your place. And that was the absolute nadir of everyday harassment. Every presentation was a training session where I had to perform the dance of the trained dog under the critical and haughty gaze of my master. At first, I tried the classic approach, a discreet circle back with HR. I sent a diplomatic email mentioning interpersonal alignment difficulties and the need for better communication bandwidth. The reply, delivered with all the tact of a live grenade, arrived a few days later, copied to Marc. Alex, we take your concerns very seriously. We encourage you to communicate more collaboratively with Marc and to think outside the box to resolve these challenges internally. Translation, we don't care. Figure it out yourself. You're a nuisance. That's when my naivete took an early retirement. I realized the company wasn't protecting its employees. It was protecting its power structure. And Marc was a toxic pawn, but strategically placed. Cynicism is my best ally, and it gave me an idea. I always kept my work phone with me. French law regarding recording conversations was strict, but I checked. Recording a conversation between you and the other person, even without their consent, is admissible in labor court if it constitutes evidence of psychological or sexual harassment. It was a Pandora's box I was opening, but above all, it was a form of professional life insurance. So I activated the recorder for every one-on-one meeting, every call, every touchscreen interaction where Marc could exert his toxic influence. It became my silent hobby, collecting evidence of his incompetence disguised as leadership. I had hours and hours of his pure narcissism. Marc boasting about having invented a synergy between two departments that didn't communicate. Marc ordering me to deliver a file yesterday without providing the necessary resources. Marc attributing my sales successes to his own transformational mentoring. The extended family had given me the opportunity to become the notary of its own dysfunction. But before I tell you how I turned my tyrannical manager into an unemployed man, if you enjoy stories of corporate karma, subscribe and comment. Who's the worst manager you've ever had? This little game went on for 6 months. 6 months of polite smiles while stockpiling ammunition. 6 months of icy patience, knowing that Marc's narcissism was a clock just waiting for its moment to self-destruct. And that moment was approaching in the form of a $15 million contract with the St. Jude Hospital Group, a contract he couldn't afford to lose, and where his pathological need to be the hero would inevitably lead him to commit the most monumental blunder of his career. And of course, I was going to be there to document it and turn it into a show. Marc's 6 months of playing the petty dictator had transformed me into the archivist of corporate misery. I no longer worked for Synergy Med. I worked for my own justice, armed with unwavering cynicism and my voice recorder. My new mantra was smile, agree, document. Meetings became spying sessions where I listened attentively, not to the substance of the discussions, which always revolved around filling out useless Excel spreadsheets to align the vision, but to the form, the passive-aggressive little phrases, the thinly veiled threats. One example among many was the email of May 14th. I had managed to secure a significant pre-order despite the lack of technical support. Marc, unable to admit that one of his subordinates could shine without his divine tutelage, sent me an email with the sober subject line, "For your information, performance review." Subject: For information, performance review. Alexander, congratulations on the St. Honoré PO. However, I'd like you to revisit the delivery deadlines you promised this client, as we're likely to experience bandwidth issues by the end of the quarter. I spoke with Dubois on the phone, and it seems better resource planning would have been necessary on your part. I'm copying the entire team to ensure we're all on the same page regarding the importance of being proactive in managing our deliverables. Yours truly, Marc. This email, copied to the entire team, was a pure demonstration of managerial cowardice, publicly congratulating me on the success while stabbing me in the back for the deadline, a deadline he himself had secretly shortened to claim an early quick win. I wisely printed the email, then took a screenshot of Dubois' actual email sent 2 days before the order, in which he confirmed the deadline was feasible. I now had proof that he was actively lying to discredit me. The escalation culminated during my annual performance review. The process, supposedly objective, is actually a charade to justify arbitrary bonuses. I had exceeded my targets by 15%. During the interview, Marc wore a contrite smile. Alexander, you have very good numbers, that's undeniable, but we'd like to see you be more strategic in your approach. Your attitude could be improved. We received some feedback from the team about your lack of synergy during the karaoke team-building activity. Yes, my failure to get excited about singing the Macarena under duress was officially a professional failing that damaged the culture of excellence. He gave me an A-, good but not excellent, and justified the lack of a significant raise with this gibberish. I had recorded the entire evaluation. My good Marc, you just signed your redundancy check while talking to me about karaoke. The real turning point was preparing the presentation for the St. Jude Hospital Group. It was the holy grail, the contract that justified all the company's meaningless jargon. Marc was hysterical, obsessed with shining. He insisted on handling the vision and strategic alignment section himself, the only thing he could vaguely understand, and above all, the physical documentation, the final technical drawings, and, crucially, the last-minute adjusted quote. Alex, make sure you understand the importance of these documents.
I've set them aside myself to make sure they're perfect. I've double-checked them myself. You'll just have to present your slide on the effectiveness of the sensors. But I'm handling the physical documentation. I don't want any last-minute surprises, okay? Be proactive, but leave the deployment strategy to me. I recorded it. I even emailed Marc after the meeting, thanking him very politely for his clarification regarding the exclusive handling of the physical documents for the St. Jude presentation, just to have a written record that he had taken full responsibility for the file. Fear of failure makes Marc arrogant and careless. That was a certainty. And the day of the presentation arrived. I had the equivalent of an atomic bomb of recordings on my hard drive. All I had to do was wait for him to press the button himself.
D-Day. The conference room at St. Jude Hospital Group reeked of stale coffee, post-traumatic stress, and the smell of money about to change hands. Before us sat the executive committee, 5 pairs of eyes representing 15 million euros at stake. My heart was pounding, but it was the cold anticipation, not fear. My phone was discreetly tucked into my inside jacket pocket, the recorder on silent mode. I had to capture the key event, the final act of betrayal. Marc was at his narcissistic peak. He started the presentation with 15 minutes of pure jargon about Synergy Med's corporate DNA, our commitment to aligning our teams with customer needs, and how we were the catalyst for transformation in the healthcare sector. Meanwhile, I was there, smiling and mentally self-mutilating as I listened to this lexical soup. My turn came. I presented the technical aspects, the performance, the clinical data, the side I was familiar with. The committee listened attentively, but when the committee chair, a remarkably efficient woman, reached the crucial section, "Very well, Marc. The product is ready. Now let's move on to the figures and the deployment schedule. Could you show us the final quote you mentioned on the phone, as well as the integration diagrams for our current system?" Marc put on his triumphant air. He opened his briefcase, the gesture slow and theatrical. He rummaged through it. He rummaged through it again. His smile began to crack. He fiddled with the few documents he had, his opening speech and a stack of outdated business cards. Just a moment," he mumbled. The president, her eyes reflecting the biological clock of a multinational corporation, remained impassive. The silence grew thick. The kind of silence that hangs heavy in an open-plan office just after a manager has shouted. That's when the predator, Marc, gained the upper hand over the incompetent. He couldn't admit his mistake. He had to find a scapegoat. His gaze fell on me, filled with the fury matched only by his own stupidity. He slammed his fist on the table, making everyone jump, and bellowed, his voice trembling. "This is unacceptable. Alexander, where's the file? I instructed you to make sure everything was there. It was your sole responsibility. The final document checklist. You sabotaged this presentation, didn't you? I told you to be proactive." He accused me of deliberately destroying vital documents in front of a management committee that had just witnessed its area manager completely lose control. I smiled, but it was the cold smile of a shark. My recorder had captured everything. The accusation, the public humiliation, the blatant lie. It was an irrefutable proof of psychological harassment and managerial incompetence, and I had proof that he had taken responsibility for the case. I made my decision in a second. Marc had just shown me the door with honors. I looked at the president of St. Jude, who was looking at me with a mixture of curiosity and disgust at the scene that had just played out. "Excuse me, Madam Chair," I said, my voice calm, almost too calm. "I'd like to clarify something, to bring the teams up to speed. Marc specifically informed me last night, by email and during a quick sync at 8:30 p.m., that he was handling the final file exclusively, ensuring his own double check to avoid bandwidth issues. This recording will confirm that." Marc went white, realizing I'd struck a nerve. "Alex, you're delusional. It's a false narrative." "No, Marc, this is the end of my collaboration with Synergy Med." I took out my phone, the old one, the one I'd used to record.
and sent an email right away. Subject: immediate resignation and strategic deployment of evidence. Recipients: Marc, HR, the CEO. I stood up. Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, please excuse the abrupt end to this meeting. However, I have just resigned from Synergy Med. Incompetence and active harassment are not among the values I support. For your information, the financial file that Marc overlooked is available via a cloud link I just sent you, along with, as a bonus, all the recordings proving Mr. Marc's incompetence and harassment. I hope this will help you think outside the box regarding your future supplier. I retrieved my briefcase, leaving Marc frozen, eyes bulging in his chaos. As I left, I glanced at the committee chairwoman who had already opened the link.
The fresh air outside was a breath of fresh air after years spent breathing in the CO2 of oversized egos. I had just committed the ultimate act of professional sedition, and my stomach reminded me of it with a slight nausea of pure adrenaline. But revenge is a matter of methodical execution, not emotion. Resignation was the detonator. The real work began now. In the car, I activated the strategic deployment sequence. The resignation email, already sent, was merely a prelude. Now I had to drive the point home. I opened my work email account, the access I was about to lose, and sent out a series of targeted missiles. The first email went to Human Resources, Clara and David. Subject: formal complaint for workplace harassment, overwhelming case file. I attached a time-stamped transcript of the St. Jude incident, the full audio recording of Marc accusing me of sabotage, Marc's email the day before taking responsibility for the case, and a selection of my best recordings, the biased performance review, the toxic quick syncs, and a conversation where Marc mocked the health of a colleague who had suffered from a burnout, the infamous lack of bandwidth. I drafted the body of the email with icy cynicism, using all their jargon against them. I have meticulously documented, proactively, and to protect my well-being, all of Mr. Marc's microaggressions and active harassment. I hope that this time you will take this matter very seriously and use this documentation to realign our company culture with the values you claim to embody. I knew HR would panic because this was no longer a vague complaint from a frustrated employee, but a ready-made legal case. The second missile was aimed at the CEO, a man who spent his time giving interviews on operational excellence and the importance of human capital. The subject line was even more impactful: urgent, exposure of Marc's managerial toxin and negative business impact. I didn't send him all the recordings, just the most damaging ones. I included the audio of Marc insulting a key client. Luckily for Marc, it was private. And most importantly, the transcript of the St. Jude incident. My message to the CEO was simple: here is proof that your area manager, Marc, is costing the company millions, not through private incompetence, but through public sabotage and harassment. Your corporate DNA is being broadcast in real time to the biggest buyers of medical equipment. Are you prepared for this level of risk? The third and most devastating blow was to the clients. I emailed a dozen key contacts, including the president of St. Jude and other major purchasing managers, all of whom had suffered at one time or another from Marc's arrogance and blunders. The subject: crucial information on the integrity of your Synergy Med partner. There, I was professional, factual, but ruthless. I explained my forced resignation, attached the audio of Marc publicly accusing me of sabotage in front of them, and most importantly, the audio of Marc in an internal meeting mocking the technical specifications requested by one of these clients. I wanted them to understand that their direct contact was both a liar and an incompetent who disregarded their needs. In less than 30 minutes, I dropped a bombshell. I wisely shut down my computer, knowing my access would be cut off at any moment. A few minutes later, my personal phone vibrated. It was a call from HR. I didn't answer. I received a frantic text from Clara, HR. Alexandra, we received your email. We've immediately launched an internal investigation. We're asking you to circle back urgently to quickly sync the complaint procedure. I simply replied, my lawyer will contact you. I have already deployed my strategy. I spent the rest of the day with my phone off and drinking excellent coffee, savoring the silence that finally replaced the buzzwords. War had been declared, and the company was now grappling with how to justify promoting an arrogant bully
while ignoring the complaints of the employee who was actually making the sales. The corporate chaos was my doing. I knew Marc was already in the CEO's office, shaking, trying to spin the situation into a false narrative, but it was too late. The evidence was in the hands of the clients and the lawyers.
The shock wave was deliciously brutal. The first victim, as expected, was Synergy Med's reputation. HR took less than 24 hours to confirm to me, through my lawyer, that Marc was immediately suspended as a precautionary measure. They had no choice. The recordings were not only damning evidence of harassment, but they also proved managerial incompetence that exposed the company to major contractual risks. Above all, they knew that the president of St. Jude and other clients had the evidence. The next step was the legal process. I filed a harassment complaint. To avoid a public trial and the exposure of a case full of hypocritical buzzwords masking abuse, the company quickly sought a settlement. I obtained a negotiated exit that included not only financial compensation for emotional distress, but more importantly, a clause guaranteeing that Marc could never receive a positive reference from Synergy Med. The CEO even had the audacity to send me a personal email, which I kept, of course, expressing sincere regret and the need to realign our teams with more ethical values. I laughed. He was mostly worried about his stock option. As for Marc, the fall was precipitous and incredibly satisfying. The harassment complaint, combined with the exposure of his behavior to key players in the industry, had a fatal professional consequence in our very closed world. Selling high-tech medical equipment relies on trust and ethics. His exposed incompetence and the legal case that clung to him meant he lost his professional license a few months later. His transformational leadership turned into humiliating unemployment, forcing him to make a strategic pivot to positions where a license, loyal clients, or any particular skills are unnecessary, perhaps in synergy consulting for struggling SMEs. It was corporate karma in all its glory. The loss of his livelihood solely due to his ego. My own situation, however, took a leap forward. My actions, though radical, had made me an honest whistleblower, at least in the eyes of those who hated Synergy Med. I had maintained impeccable professional relationships with clients, including St. Jude. Their problem wasn't with me, but with Marc and the corporate culture that protected him. I was quickly recruited by their main competitor, a smaller, more agile company, and above all, one run by people who, surprisingly, understood the concept of a job well done. But the real victory came 6 months after my resignation. The St. Jude Hospital Group, burned by the chaos created by Marc and Synergy Med, broke its preliminary agreement and signed an $18 million contract. With me, at my new employer. And they weren't the only ones. 2 other key Synergy Med clients who had received my crucial information followed suit. I saw my former sales manager for the region, a guy who had silently witnessed my humiliations, watching me from afar at a professional conference a few months later. He looked exhausted, with the vacant stare of a soldier left behind on the battlefield without ammunition. He said, "Alex, without you, we're losing all the quick wins. We can't even get our teams in the field anymore." I just smiled, sipping my champagne. Maybe you should think outside the box and recruit a competent manager. But hey, that's not my area of expertise anymore. The ultimate irony is that I gained more money, respect, and peace of mind in 1 year of revenge than in 8 years of forced obedience in that toxic company. The only thing I learned in the corporate world is that if you're asked to be proactive, you have to be proactive for your own survival. And always, always document incompetence. My only regret? Not having been more sarcastic in person at the time of the resignation. But Marc wouldn't have understood.
He was too busy deploying his strategy of denial. If you enjoyed the story of methodical corporate execution, let us know by commenting and sharing. And remember, your phone is your best friend at the office.